The oceans keep their silence well. Beneath the rolling tides, where light dies into an eternal twilight, lies a world both ancient and uncharted. For every map we have drawn of mountains and deserts, the sea conceals entire continents of memory, submerged valleys, forgotten coastlines, and drowned plateaus whisper of an earth unlike the one we know today. Here, in the realm between fact and possibility, we begin to ask the questions that echo like sonar through time. Did civilizations rise and fall before ours, their monuments swallowed whole by the waves? Did the sea not only cradle life's birth, but also erase the first sparks of human greatness? In this story of abyssal shadows and lost horizons, we step into the riddle of what the waters have hidden from us since the dawn of memory. If this journey into Earth's forgotten past resonates with you, I invite you to linger with us through its unfolding. Let the tide of stories carry you. Like, share, and subscribe. Not as a command, but as a way to keep our explorations alive together. This channel thrives when curiosity itself becomes our compass. The Earth we inherit today is only the latest mask worn by an ever-changing world. To understand the forgotten past, we must step backward into an age when the continents were dressed differently, when seas had pulled back, and the shape of the land told another story. The Pleistocene, harsh and luminous with ice, was an epoch where shorelines stretched hundreds of miles farther than they do now, revealing plains that would one day be drowned by returning oceans. It is here, in that liminal space between water and earth, that our first chapter begins. Imagine a horizon wider than any we know, where the low roar of the sea lies distant and muted. Where we now sail over the North Sea, there was once Doggerland, a vast expanse of fertile grassland connecting Britain to Europe. Herds of aurochs, bison, and red deer grazed on meadows that no human eye will ever see again. To the north, glaciers towered in shimmering walls, reflecting sunlight like broken mirrors. And across these exposed landscapes, bands of humans moved slowly, endlessly, with the patience of survival. They were not yet builders of stone monuments, nor keepers of written records. Their language was the fire crackling between them, the gesture of a hand pointing toward distant game, the quiet breath that rose when danger drew near. Their lives were written not on parchment, but on footprints in soft mud, prints that would later vanish beneath floods and silt. Yet even in their transience, they carried within them the memory of fire and the persistence of hope. The air of the Pleistocene was sharper, cleaner, edged with the taste of ice. Nights fell with a severity we can scarcely imagine, and without fire, a human could not endure. To cross the threshold into darkness was to enter a world where predators owned the silence. Lions prowled Europe then, larger than any lion today, moving like shadows across open tundra. The cave bear and the dire wolf held dominion too, forces of muscle and fang that demanded respect. For humans, survival was less a triumph than a rhythm. Hunt, eat, shelter, guard. Each day was not a victory, but a postponement of extinction. And yet, in that fragile span of time, there was wonder. Rivers once winding across Doggerland carried shoals of fish glittering like scales of light. Birds migrated in clouds so vast they darkened the sky, offering a feast to those with patience enough to wait beneath their paths. And in the depths of winter, the aurora shimmered even farther south, its veils of green and violet painting the night sky in colors that must have seemed like messages from gods no one had yet named. Archaeology gifts us fragments, but fragments are enough to shape vision. We know from worked flint blades that these early humans were skilled at more than endurance. They were innovators. They crafted tools sharp enough to cut sinew from bone, to pierce hide, to scrape wood into the beginnings of spear shafts. And they carried these tools across long distances, suggesting not only movement, but trade, exchange, the first threads of a network that spanned beyond any one group. Such evidence reminds us that even in what we imagine as wilderness, there was community, and within community, the seed of culture. But what we know in science only sharpens what we cannot know. For every shard of flint, there are countless songs never recorded, tales spoken in flickering firelight that have evaporated from memory. Did they tell stories of the ice giants on the horizon, or imagine the sea as a hungry force waiting to return? Did they already sense, in some primordial way, that the earth itself was unstable, that what was land today might be sea tomorrow? We will never hear their voices, and yet in the silence of these drowned plains, imagination speaks with its own authority. To walk among them in thought is to feel the precariousness of existence. A sudden storm could destroy the hunt. A broken leg could doom an entire family. To see a child survive its first winters was cause for celebration. And yet, their lives were not only hardship. Burial sites from this era suggest care for the dead, flowers placed in graves, ochre dusted upon bodies. In the midst of cold survival, there was tenderness, ritual, meaning. Humanity was not only struggling to endure, it was already seeking to belong, to leave traces of love upon the earth. The geography of this forgotten world is a character in itself. Consider the Black Sea, then a vast freshwater lake cut off from the ocean. When the Mediterranean burst through the Bosporus, the flood that followed would drown entire villages, displacing lives and transforming memory into myth. Some scholars argue this event may lie behind ancient flood legends that later traveled into the Near East and beyond. Though the timing is debated, the image of rushing water swallowing homes, hearths, and fields is a universal terror, one that those early people must have carried in whispered warnings to their children. And so we stand at the edge of memory, gazing not into written history, but into its prologue. The hunter squats on the plain, pressing a palm into the earth, reading tracks as if they were scripture. His breath clouds in the frost, and in his eyes is the reflection of an ice wall rising in the distance. Beside him, the woman binds sinew into a cord, her fingers practiced from countless repetitions, knowing that the strength of a family may depend on this simple work. Around them, children learn by watching, by mimicking, their laughter piercing the cold. All of this now lies beneath hundreds of feet of water, erased yet not forgotten. The oceans are keepers of silence, but silence is not absence. What they cover, they preserve in their own way. Tools scattered across seabeds, ancient hearths buried in silt, bones calcified into secrecy. With every sonar scan, with every diver's descent, we reclaim fragments of a lost world. And each discovery pulls us deeper into the realization that the boundaries of history are not fixed, but fluid, like the tides themselves. Here, at the threshold of land and sea, the first chapter of our story anchors itself. It is the reminder that humanity began not in the cities or temples that later rise, but in the raw dialogue between ice and fire, predator and prey, land and sea. It is the reminder that the earth we see today is not stable ground, but only a momentary stage, destined to change again. And it is the whisper that what lies beneath the water may not simply be barren plain, but the echoes of lives once lived, voices once raised, fires once burning. As the Pleistocene draws its curtain of silence, the stage is set for our next exploration. For beyond survival, beyond the hunt and the fire, humanity begins to gather in ways that suggest something larger, a weaving of story, ritual, and permanence. Where once there were only scattered families, now there will be villages. And where the sea once pulled back, it will return, swallowing those first fragile homes as if to remind us that nothing is forever. If the edge of memory was defined by the ice and the shifting seas, then the heart of memory was shaped by fire. Fire was not simply warmth or light. It was the difference between extinction and survival, between chaos and community. To hold a flame in the Pleistocene night was to possess a small sun, one that pushed back the predators lurking just beyond the glow, one that gave humans a dominion no other creature had known before. Imagine the landscape once more, a tundra stretching to the horizon, the cold so sharp it carved pain into the bones. The wind howls across open plains, carrying with it the scent of snow, musk oxen, and the faintest trace of lion musk. And there, in the hollow of a limestone cave, or beneath a canopy of pine branches, a group of humans kneel around a fire. Sparks leap upward into the darkness, each spark a momentary star before fading back into nothingness. Their faces, painted in shadow and orange glow, are lit with a reverence that borders on worship. For them, fire is not a tool. It is a living presence. The mastery of fire was not inevitable. To tame it was to court danger, for flames consume as easily as they protect. Archaeological evidence places fire's use deep into the Paleolithic, with charred bones and hearths dating back hundreds of thousands of years. Yet its controlled, habitual use became one of the great pivots of our story. Fire softened roots and meat, rendering them digestible. It drove predators back into the dark. It allowed migration into climates that would otherwise have been death sentences. With fire, the night ceased to be impenetrable. With fire, stories could be told long after the sun had vanished. Consider the transformation it wrought in the body. Cooked food offered more calories with less effort, shrinking the demands upon teeth and jaw, allowing brains to grow larger in return. Around the fire, the human mind began to feed not only on flesh, but on imagination. Shadows cast upon walls became creatures, ancestors, myths, and in those shadows, language itself grew, not as lists or commands, but as shared rhythms of survival. Fire was the original stage upon which narrative entered the world. Close your eyes and picture a winter night some 20,000 years ago. A blizzard has scoured the land, forcing a group to remain sheltered in their cave. The fire burns low, the wood damp from snow, but still it holds. Around it, figures huddle close, the children pressed into the warmth of their mothers, the hunters sharpening flint with long, patient strokes. In the corner, an elder speaks, not to command, but to recall. He speaks of hunts past, of rivers frozen so solid they could be crossed by mammoth herds, of ancestors who braved the same cold. His voice, thick and slow, weaves memory into myth. And the children listen, their faces wide-eyed, seeing through his words a world that had vanished long before their birth. Without fire, these words would fade into the night wind. With fire, they linger, embedding themselves in the marrow of the tribe. But fire also revealed the fragility of human existence. Too far from its circle, and darkness reclaimed everything. Too much dependence upon it, and forests fell, grasslands burned, landscapes changed. In Australia, evidence suggests humans set controlled fires tens of thousands of years ago, reshaping ecosystems, clearing fields for game. This was the beginning of a pattern that would echo through history. humanity not only enduring the earth, but altering it. Fire was both salvation and the first step toward dominion, a dominion that would forever change the planet's face. The archaeological record shows us blackened bones, hearths layered in ancient ash, and circles of stone that once protected flames from the wind. But beyond the evidence lies imagination. How many nights must have passed when a spark failed, when rain drowned the coals, when families shivered in silence, knowing that the fire was gone? The desperation of striking stone upon stone in the dark, praying for a spark to catch. This was as much a ritual as any sacrifice offered in later temples. Fire demanded devotion. It had to be fed, tended, protected. In its glow, the earliest humans learned responsibility, patience, foresight. A neglected flame meant death. A nurtured flame meant tomorrow. There is poetry in the thought that every fire, whether in the Pleistocene or today, is a descendant of that first wild spark. The fire in a modern hearth, the flame of a candle, the burning core of cities, all are echoes of the fires that once smoked in the caves of our ancestors. We inherit not only their blood, but their flame, carried forward across time like a torch in a relay that has never faltered. And yet, even with fire, the night was never fully conquered. Beyond the reach of its glow lay eyes gleaming in the dark, wolves pacing in silence, great cats circling with patience. The fire's safety was relative, not absolute. It was a fragile perimeter of light against an infinite darkness. Perhaps it is this balance, the knowledge that safety is always conditional, that gave rise to myth. Around the fire, humans spoke of spirits that dwelt in the shadows, of beasts with powers beyond the natural, of ancestors who might guard or curse. Fire was both shield and gateway, a line between what was known and what forever lay beyond. The evidence of cave art deepens this picture. Painted upon the walls of Chauvet, Altamira, and Lascaux are visions of animals: mammoths, bison, lions, horses, rendered with astonishing vitality. Some scholars believe these were more than art. They were rituals performed by firelight. Imagine the flickering of flames casting shadows upon the walls, making painted animals appear to move, to breathe, to live. In that shimmering light, art became something more than representation. It became invocation, a dialogue between human and beast, between hunter and hunted, between life and death. Without fire, the caves are silent. With fire, they become sanctuaries of vision. And perhaps it is here that the roots of belief were born. Fire carried not only heat and light, but mystery. It consumed without mercy, yet left behind ash that could be painted, bone that could be hardened. It could leap from control into disaster, destroying entire forests, driving men and animals alike into flight. To hold fire was to hold power, but never complete mastery. It was always a companion, never a servant. And so, humanity gave it meaning, saw in its flames the breath of gods, the eyes of spirits, the heart of the world itself. What remains most poignant is the intimacy fire created. In its glow, strangers became kin, and kin became tribes. The fire circle was the first hearth, the first home, the first gathering place. It was not the walls of a house that made a community, but the flames at its center. Around it, humans discovered not only survival, but belonging. And belonging, once kindled, is as enduring as fire itself. As the Paleolithic stretched onward, fire traveled wherever humans traveled, across continents, across seas, into new lands and new climates. The flame was carried as carefully as children, as fiercely guarded as life itself. It lit the path from Africa to Europe, from Asia to the Americas, from the dawn of our kind to the age of civilization. In every chapter of humanity, fire waits in the margins, steady and watchful, the eternal witness to our becoming. And so we close this chapter as we began, with fire in the darkness. The spark leaps upward, fragile yet defiant. The faces around it glow with warmth, their eyes reflecting a universe larger than themselves. For in the light of fire, humanity first saw not only what was, but what could be. And that vision, once kindled, has never been extinguished. But fire alone could not hold back the rising waters. As humanity grew in skill and number, as fires multiplied and communities expanded, the earth itself shifted once again. Seas rose, rivers changed their course, and the fragile settlements built by human hands faced the relentless return of water. What began as scattered families around flames would grow into villages of stone and clay, only to be tested by floods that erased the boundaries of land and memory. From the scattered fire circles of the Paleolithic, humanity began to gather in ways that reshaped existence itself. No longer only wanderers moving with the herds, some groups settled where the earth's bounty was generous, where rivers carved fertile valleys, and where stone and clay offered the promise of permanence. This was the Neolithic dawn, when homes began to rise from the soil, when fields were cleared, when animals were no longer only hunted but kept, tended, and slowly transformed into companions of survival. The rhythm of life shifted from the relentless pursuit of game to the steady labor of planting, harvesting, and storing. The story of humanity stepped from the fleeting glow of firelight into the enduring weight of walls. Picture a plain stretching under the warmth of a sun less hostile than the ice ages that preceded it. Grasses sway, dotted with the shimmer of wild grain. Beside a river, families carve out spaces where hearths are no longer temporary. Mud and straw are pressed together, hardened by sun, forming walls where smoke rises through carefully cut openings. Within these shelters, the air smells of earth and ash, mingled with the musk of animals corralled nearby. The first villages were not grand. They were clusters of huts, their shapes humble, their scale fragile. Yet they represented a profound change, humanity anchoring itself to place, declaring, however softly, that the earth could be shaped to hold us. In these villages, the tempo of life shifted. Each day was tied to the cycle of the land. Wheat and barley sprouted in fields, their harvests stored in clay vessels painted with simple patterns, as if to remind their keepers that beauty has always been as essential as function. Goats and sheep bleated in pens, their milk and meat ensuring survival when the hunt grew scarce. Dogs lingered at thresholds, their eyes bright with loyalty and hunger alike, already entwined with human destiny. The village was a living tapestry, where each thread, human, animal, plant, wove together in mutual dependence. And with permanence came memory, pressed into earth itself. At sites such as Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, archaeologists uncover walls layered with generations of building, each new home rising upon the ashes of the old. Inside, walls were painted with red ochre and adorned with images of bulls, leopards, and geometric designs, echoing a symbolic world where the line between survival and spirituality blurred. The dead were often buried beneath the floors of these homes, their presence lingering as guardians or silent ancestors, linking each dwelling not only to the living, but also to the continuum of memory. To step inside such a house was to step into a space layered with story, each wall holding whispers of lives lived before. Yet permanence did not erase fragility. Floods swept through valleys, Rains spoiled harvests, and diseases spread where humans and animals shared space too closely. For every successful season, there was the threat of ruin. A single bad harvest could turn abundance into famine, and famine into despair. In settling down, humanity traded mobility for rootedness, but rootedness brought its own dangers. To lose a harvest was not to move on, but to suffer where one stood. Villages held promise, but they also held risk. Still, the promise was powerful. With villages came the possibility of surplus, and surplus meant time. Time to carve ornaments from bone, to paint vessels, to weave cloth from flax, to tell stories not only of survival, but of the cosmos. A rhythm of ritual grew around these cycles. Festivals of planting and harvest, dances beneath the stars, offerings to forces believed to govern the rain and the fertility of the soil. Humanity was no longer only reacting to nature's demands. It was reaching towards something larger, seeking patterns, seeking meaning, finding in the seasons a kind of order that could be sung, remembered, repeated. The architecture itself became a statement. Where the Paleolithic had given us caves lit by fire, the Neolithic gave us stone foundations that still endure. Consider the great stone enclosures of Göbekli Tepe, carved and raised in what is now southeastern Turkey, long before pottery or farming were common in the region. Pillars etched with lions, vultures, and serpents stood in circles, aligned in ways that suggest ceremony rather than shelter. Here, humanity gathered not to live, but to commune, to mark something sacred. It was as if the act of building itself had become a form of worship, a declaration that humanity could inscribe its place upon the earth with permanence. Every village, humble or monumental, was a negotiation with the environment. Fields exhausted by repeated planting forced innovation, crop rotation, irrigation, and eventually the recognition that the earth itself needed rest. Such insights were not written, but remembered, passed from generation to generation in spoken word, ritual, and practice. These first farmers were also the first philosophers of ecology, their survival dependent upon reading the language of soil and sky. Within these villages, new dynamics emerged. Ownership, kinship, and hierarchy began to crystallize. Grain stored in clay jars was no longer only sustenance, but wealth, a measure of power. The hands that tilled the soil were not always the same hands that feasted upon its fruits. Inequality, subtle at first, began to appear in the arrangement of homes, in the scale of storage, in the adornments buried with the dead. Community brought togetherness, but it also brought the seeds of division. Where once the hunt had demanded shared effort, now the harvest could be divided unequally, hoarded, or controlled. The village was both cradle and crucible, nurturing cooperation while also igniting the beginnings of conflict. Yet still, the villages stood as beacons. They were symbols of humanity's refusal to drift endlessly, its insistence that the earth could be persuaded to yield not just survival, but stability. And with stability came imagination, flowering into myth. Stories were told of gods of grain and sky, of animals that sacrificed themselves for human hunger, of waters that could both nourish and destroy. The myths carried truths not in the language of fact, but in the rhythm of survival. They gave meaning to the cycles of planting and death, to the fragile balance of life rooted in soil. The archaeological remains we uncover today, beads of bone, fragments of woven mats, walls of hardened clay, are not mere artifacts. They are whispers of lives lived with intimacy, of children playing in courtyards, of women grinding grain until their bones wore grooves from repetition, of men mending tools beside the fire. Each object speaks of hands that touched it, lives that leaned upon it, hopes that flickered in its presence. To look upon these remains is to feel time fold, to sense the kinship of lives separated from us by thousands of years, yet joined by the same needs, the same hungers, the same fragile dreams. But the permanence of villages was never absolute. The seas were patient, and the earth was restless. Shorelines advanced as glaciers melted, swallowing fields and huts alike. Rivers shifted their paths, eroding the foundations of homes. Whole communities disappeared beneath rising waters, leaving only faint traces in sediment and myth. To build in stone and clay was to defy impermanence, but impermanence always returned. Sometimes with a flood, sometimes with fire, sometimes with silence. And so we leave this chapter standing in the shadow of clay walls, hearing the faint echo of voices that once filled them. Voices rising above the hum of cicadas, the rush of rivers, the cries of penned animals. These villages, fragile and enduring, were the first steps toward the civilizations that would later rise. But they were also precarious footholds, reminders that permanence is an illusion, that every wall is built on borrowed time. Beyond them waits another story, carried not only by stone and clay, but by the vast and unforgiving sea. For in the myths of floods and drowned lands, in the whispers of kingdoms lost beneath the waves, we begin to hear the echoes of a drowned world. And it is there, where legend meets archaeology, that our next chapter must begin. The story of humanity's first villages is not only about what was built, but about what was lost. For every clay wall that hardened in the sun, for every hearth that burned with continuity, there were others that vanished beneath the slow, relentless rise of water. The earth has always been a restless host, and nowhere is this more evident than in the shifting border between land and sea. What is solid today may lie drowned tomorrow, hidden in silence for millennia. When we listen closely to the oldest myths and compare them with the geology of drowned coasts, we begin to sense a pattern. Stories of floods, kingdoms swallowed by waves, and lands remembered only in dreamlike fragments. These are the echoes of the drowned world, fragments of truth concealed beneath legend. Across northern Europe lies the memory of Doggerland, that vast stretch of grassland and forest that once connected Britain to the continent. 10,000 years ago, it was alive with herds and hunters, villages and hearths. Then, as the glaciers melted and the seas swelled, the waters surged back, drowning fields and forests, scattering the communities that had settled there. What remains now are fishing nets that sometimes catch bones of mammoth antler tools or hearthstones carried far offshore. Beneath the waves, entire landscapes lie sealed in sediment, silent yet enduring. To imagine standing on a meadow where the North Sea now churns is to feel the weight of impermanence written into the earth itself. Similar stories emerge from other corners of the world. Along the coast of India, in the Gulf of Combat, sonar has revealed geometric structures buried deep beneath the silt. Some scholars suggest these may be remnants of ancient settlements, though debate remains fierce. Natural formations or human work, the evidence lies blurred, distorted by millennia of currents. Yet local legends speak of cities once glorious, swallowed whole by the sea. Fishermen tell of temples glimpsed in the depths, of bells that toll when storms rage above. Whether these are echoes of truth or poetry, they carry the same undertone. The ocean is both a giver and a thief. On the far edge of Japan's islands, off Yonaguni, stone terraces descend beneath the waves in haunting precision. Some divers insist they see stairways, platforms, and walls carved with deliberate geometry. Others argue the formations are natural, sculpted by current and erosion. Yet when viewed in the shifting light of the sea, they appear like the skeleton of a sunken city, a ruin caught between science and legend. Here again, myth provides a lens. The Ryukyu Islands are rich with stories of gods and ancient builders, tales that suggest a deeper memory of lands altered by the ocean. These echoes are not confined to artifacts or geology. They live in stories repeated across cultures, separated by oceans yet bound by the same theme. Flood myths are nearly universal. Mesopotamian epics recount deluges sent by gods to cleanse the earth. The Hebrew Bible tells of Noah's Ark and the waters that swallowed mountains. Hindu traditions describe Manu guided by a great fish to survive a cosmic flood. The Maya, the Greeks, the Norse, all held myths of waters rising, of worlds erased and begun again. How can such stories, scattered across continents, be explained? Are they coincidences of imagination, or the preserved memory of real floods, disasters retold until they hardened into legend? The geological record lends weight to these myths. As the last ice age ended, sea levels rose by over 100 meters, swallowing vast coastlines. Entire regions where humans had lived for tens of thousands of years were inundated, their memory carried only in oral tradition. To the people who witnessed it, the rising sea was no gentle drift. Shorelines vanished within lifetimes. Villages were lost. Rivers changed course. What was once fertile land became salt marsh, then open water. It is no wonder that survivors framed these events not simply as environmental shifts, but as cosmic reckonings. In the drowned Black Sea, another mystery lingers. Geologists have proposed that once it was a vast freshwater lake, isolated until Mediterranean waters broke through the Bosporus with catastrophic force. The flood that followed would have reshaped not only landscapes, but human history, displacing communities, scattering migrations, embedding itself in memory as a story too great to be forgotten. Some have linked this event to Near Eastern flood myths, seeing in it the root of a narrative that later spread into epic and scripture. Others urge caution, reminding us that memory is malleable, that floods occur in many places, each capable of seeding myth. Yet whether or not the Black Sea flood is the origin, the truth remains. Humanity has always lived at the mercy of water, and water has always shaped our stories. The echoes of the drowned world haunt archaeology, with questions it struggles to answer. How many villages, towns, even proto-cities now lie hidden beneath continental shelves, sealed beneath layers of silt? When we explore the shallow seas of today, we are not merely mapping geology. We are searching the margins of history itself. With sonar and submersibles, we trace outlines of rivers long buried, forests preserved in darkness, artifacts that speak of lives lived on lands now erased. Each discovery deepens the sense that human history is incomplete, that our timeline is more fragile and fragmentary than we once believed. But the drowned world speaks not only in evidence but in mood. There is something deeply human about standing on a modern shoreline, listening to the waves, and sensing a weight beyond sight. The ocean's horizon is not only distance, it is memory. It holds secrets too vast for us to comprehend, stories swallowed and preserved in silence. To look upon the sea is to feel history watching back, reminding us that what we build can be taken, that what we know can be forgotten, that the earth is never finished with us. Yet within this silence lies a paradox. Loss also preserves. Beneath salt and silt, artifacts are sealed from air, protected by the very waters that destroyed their world. Entire forests lie intact beneath the North Sea. Tools of stone and bone remain where they fell. The ocean erases the surface but keeps its own archive below. One day, with patient exploration, more of these archives may open, offering us glimpses into lives erased, but not annihilated. And so we listen to the echoes of the drowned world. They are not merely myths, nor merely geology. They are the meeting place of both, where memory and earth entwine. Floods gave birth to gods of water, to rituals of appeasement, to stories of judgment and renewal. The drowned plains gave us legends of kingdoms lost, of golden ages sunk beyond recovery. And in their silence, we are reminded of our own fragility, that even now, cities glittering with steel and glass could one day lie beneath future seas, their memory reduced to myth in ages yet unborn. The drowned world is not only past, it is also future. Climate shifts even now whisper of rising seas, of coasts redrawn, of cities vulnerable to the same fate as Doggerland or the Gulf of Combat. The echoes remind us that we are not the first to face the sea's advance, nor will we be the last. The ocean is patient, and its memory long. Humanity may build, but water remembers. As this chapter closes, we find ourselves standing on a shoreline at dusk, the tide creeping forward across sand that was once meadow, forest, and home. The waves roll in, retreat, and roll in again, erasing footprints, swallowing memory. Somewhere beneath them lies a hearthstone blackened with ancient ash, a fragment of pottery, a bone once shaped by human hands. They remain there, waiting, whispering, reminding us that every civilization stands on the edge of disappearance. And in the next turn of our story, we will descend farther still, into the contested depths, where rumor becomes vision, where divers claim to see entire cities etched into the seabed. Beyond the echoes of drowned lands lies the tantalizing mystery of places spoken of as true Atlantis, where archaeology and legend collide in a theater, lit not by fire, but by the dim, shifting light of the ocean. The ocean conceals many shapes, some carved by currents and time, others whispering of human hands. As we drift deeper into the drowned world, speculation gathers like silt, forming visions of cities beneath the waves. They exist in a twilight realm between archaeology and legend, where evidence is tantalizing but never conclusive, and where imagination supplies what the sea refuses to surrender. To speak of these places is to step into a riddle, one where truth flickers like light through water, visible, elusive, never quite within reach. Off the coast of Japan, at Yonaguni, the seabed rises into terraces, steps, and platforms that appear carved with impossible precision. Divers glide across vast stone blocks, their edges sharp as though shaped by chisels, their planes stacked like walls or pyramids. Some swear they see a grand stairway descending into the abyss, an altar poised in solemn silence, a carved face eroded but still discernible. Photographs ignite debate. Are these ruins of a forgotten civilization, perhaps swallowed at the end of the last ice age? Or are they natural formations sculpted by tectonic shifts and erosion? The ocean will not answer, and so we argue in its silence. To the west, in the Gulf of Combat, sonar surveys have traced what appear to be regular grids, foundations aligned with intention rather than accident. Silt clouds much of the evidence, burying it beneath layers of time. Yet fragments of pottery, stone tools, and artifacts have been dredged from the seabed, stirring visions of cities older than the Indus Valley itself, perhaps stretching back to the Neolithic dawn. Critics argue these finds are misinterpreted, that rivers carried artifacts to the sea, that geometry can arise from nature's own patterns. But the allure remains. To imagine an ancient metropolis swallowed by tides long before recorded history is to acknowledge how much of our story may yet be missing. The Caribbean, too, has its rumors. In the waters off Cuba, sonar scans have revealed massive structures deep beneath the surface, stone formations rising in shapes reminiscent of pyramids, roads, and plazas. Explorers who glimpsed the images spoke of patterns too deliberate to ignore, of symmetries that suggested design. Yet expeditions remain few, and the evidence elusive, hidden beneath depths that resist easy exploration. The very possibility hints at civilizations we do not yet know how to place in time, existing outside the neat chronology of textbooks. These cities beneath the waves are more than geological puzzles. They are mirrors for our longing, for the human desire to believe that we are not the first, that greatness has risen and fallen before us, leaving only ruins as testimony. They compel us because they stand at the crossroads of science and story, inviting both analysis and wonder. In the depths, every stone carries the weight of mystery, and mystery is a current stronger than skepticism. To dive among such structures is to feel the breath catch, to sense not only the mass of stone, but the enormity of absence. Divers describe the silence as cathedral-like, the light shifting across surfaces as though filtered through stained glass. Fish drift through imagined corridors. Corals cling to what might once have been steps, and the sea itself becomes both guardian and vandal, preserving and eroding in the same gesture. In those moments, the boundary between archaeology and myth dissolves. What is real is less important than what is felt. The conviction that we are brushing against something vast, something left behind. If cities truly lie beneath the waves, what stories would they tell? Were they villages like Çatalhöyük, grown large and bold until the sea reclaimed them? Were they temples like Göbekli Tepe, built in reverence to gods whose names are long forgotten? Or were they nothing more than illusions, the mind imposing order on chaos, shaping random stones into visions of grandeur? Each possibility is its own kind of truth, and each reminds us of the fragility of human permanence. Legends echo alongside these sites, lending them resonance beyond geology. The peoples of Japan speak of sea gods and submerged kingdoms. Along the Indian coast, myths tell of Dwarka, a city founded by Krishna himself, whose golden towers were swallowed by the sea. Caribbean lore whispers of islands that rose and fell, of civilizations vanished into the deep. These stories, woven into cultural memory, amplify the mystery of the underwater formations, turning them into possible remnants of myth made flesh. Skepticism remains vital. Scientists warn against seeing civilization in every stone. The ocean floor is restless, shaped by earthquakes, currents, and erosion. Regular shapes, terraces, even apparent stairways can arise without human intervention. The danger lies in projecting desire upon rock, in mistaking hope for evidence. Yet even skepticism cannot erase the allure. For even if these cities are not human, they still remind us of the uncanny artistry of nature itself, an artistry so precise it blurs the line between natural and constructed. The debate itself becomes part of the story. Archaeologists dive, measure, analyze, publish findings, and others counter them, reminding us of the limits of evidence when buried beneath oceans. In the absence of certainty, imagination thrives. Perhaps that is the point. The sea keeps some truths deliberately unfinished, forcing us to exist in the space between knowing and wondering. What makes these drowned visions so compelling is not only their mystery, but their scale of implication. If proven true, if genuine cities lie beneath the waves older than known civilizations, then our timeline fractures. We would be forced, to reconsider what humans achieved and when. The neat progression from foraging to farming to city would blur, replaced by something older, stranger, less linear. We might have to admit that history is less a ladder and more a cycle, with rises and collapses hidden in the depths. Even without proof, the image lingers. The mind cannot help but see those terraces at Yonaguni as steps, those grids in Kambat as streets, those pyramidal shapes off Cuba as monuments. Whether they are true cities or illusions, they ignite the same flame of curiosity. They remind us that the ocean is not empty, but layered with possibilities. And possibilities, even unproven, shape the way we see ourselves. Standing at the shore, one realizes that every wave is a boundary, concealing as much as it reveals. Beneath the foam lies another world, and beneath that, another, each older, each stranger. The drowned plains of Doggerland, the terraces of Yonaguni, the rumored plazas of Cuba, all beckon us to imagine civilizations erased, but not forgotten. In their silence, they remind us of our own vulnerability, that the cities we build today, with steel and glass rising high into the sky, may one day join them beneath the sea, their skyscrapers transformed into reefs, their plazas colonized by fish. And so this chapter closes with an image of a diver floating before a vast stone surface, light trembling across it, the sea pressing in all around. He reaches out a hand, brushes sediment from the stone, and wonders if it is wall or rock, ruin or accident. He cannot know. None of us can. The sea keeps its secrets, but in those secrets, in that silence, lies the promise of stories still waiting to surface. The cities beneath the waves may or may not exist as we imagine them, but the idea of them is as powerful as any truth. They are our reminder that the past is unfinished, that history is not a closed book, but a tide still shifting. And as we turn now to the next chapter, we step into a legend older than any ruin and more enduring than any myth. The story of Atlantis, the city of memory and metaphor, the vision of a civilization too perfect to last, too fragile to endure, yet too powerful to ever vanish from human thought. Few names resonate across the centuries like Atlantis. To speak it is to summon visions of shining cities, columns of marble rising from a perfect island, harbors filled with ships of gleaming bronze, and avenues where wisdom and power walked hand in hand. Plato gave us this vision more than 2 millennia ago, casting Atlantis as a tale of hubris and loss, a civilization destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe. Yet in that destruction lay a story so potent it refuses to die. Atlantis is not only a myth, it is a mirror reflecting both our dreams of perfection and our fear of collapse. When Plato described Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he situated it beyond the pillars of Heracles in the Atlantic as a vast island empire greater than Libya and Asia combined. It was a place of prosperity, of advanced knowledge, of order and grandeur. But arrogance grew alongside abundance, and the Atlanteans, drunk on their power, turned to conquest. In response, the gods unleashed catastrophe, sinking the island into the sea. To Plato, Atlantis was an allegory, a warning to Athens and to all states that pride and corruption lead only to ruin. And yet, though framed as philosophy, the tale has taken on a life beyond metaphor. For generations, seekers have asked, was Atlantis real? The debate stretches across centuries, entangling explorers, philosophers, and scientists. Some place Atlantis in the Mediterranean, linking it to the eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, whose volcanic fury around 1600 BCE destroyed much of the Minoan civilization. The eruption was so violent, it shattered the island, sent tsunamis sweeping into Crete, and darkened skies across the world. Could Plato's story have been a distorted memory of this disaster, passed down in fragments until it reached his ears? Others look farther afield, to the Caribbean, to South America, to Antarctica. Each location bears traces of lost cultures, of sudden cataclysms, of ruins that seem to whisper of a vanished greatness. Yet certainty always slips away, as elusive as the city itself. What is certain is that the earth has witnessed calamities grand enough to inspire the myth. The sky itself has shattered more than once. The younger Dryas, some 13,000 years ago, may have been triggered by a cometary impact, its fragments raining fire across continents. Forests burned, megafauna perished, and climates shifted abruptly. To those who survived, the world itself must have seemed to end. What stories did they tell to explain such terror? Could Atlantis be not a single place, but a memory of many such cataclysms, compressed into a single legend of a city swallowed by sea and sky? Volcanoes, too, have left their mark upon human imagination. The memory of Thera's eruption lingers in Greek myth, in tales of gods warring with giants, in stories of a world torn apart by fire and ash. In Indonesia, the eruption of Toba 70,000 years ago plunged the earth into volcanic winter, nearly extinguishing humanity itself. Each eruption is both spectacle and devastation. Skies darkened, harvests ruined, ash burying villages whole. To those who lived through such events, the idea of a mighty city vanishing overnight would not have seemed metaphor, but reality. Yet Atlantis persists, not because it is a puzzle of geography, but because it speaks to something within us. It is the dream of perfection undone, a civilization so advanced, so beautiful, that it could not endure its own excess. It embodies the paradox of human achievement, that our greatest triumphs carry within them the seeds of collapse. We see it echoed in Rome's fall, in the decline of the Maya, in the dust storms that consumed the great cities of Mesopotamia. Atlantis is not one place. It is every place that has risen too high, too fast, too proudly. But still, we search. Expeditions launch into the depths of the Atlantic, scanning the seabed for ruins. Divers comb the Mediterranean for hints of palaces drowned by shifting seas. Satellites trace faint outlines beneath shallow waters, every anomaly stirring new speculation. The allure is irresistible. To be the one who rediscovers Atlantis would be to hold in your hands the key to humanity's forgotten greatness. And so the legend lives, not only as warning, but as hope, that we are heirs to more than we remember, that a lost chapter of brilliance awaits rediscovery beneath the waves. Even if no stones are ever raised from the sea, Atlantis remains a truth of another kind. It is a story we tell ourselves about fragility. For every city built, every empire raised, every tower rising into the sky, there lingers the knowledge that all of it could vanish, not in centuries but in a single day and night. The earth is vast, and we are small. Atlantis reminds us that we build always on borrowed ground, under skies that can darken without warning, beside seas that can rise without mercy. And yet, Atlantis is not despair. It is also a story of renewal. Plato did not end with destruction alone. He framed Atlantis as a lesson, a chance for reflection. In its ruin lies a reminder that collapse is not the end but a turning. Civilizations fall, but humanity endures, carries forward fragments, rebuilds, reimagines. Perhaps the real power of Atlantis is that it lingers as both caution and inspiration, a symbol of what can be lost, but also of what can be dreamed again. Close your eyes and picture it, a city of white stone and shining metal, harbors alive with sails, gardens blooming in terraces that rose like stairways to the sky. Children play in courtyards shaded by columns. Priests walk in temples where statues gleam in the sun, and towers rise so high they seem to brush the clouds. Then, in a single night, the earth trembles, the sky fills with fire, and the sea surges forward with unstoppable force. Screams echo, prayers rise, walls collapse, and the city is gone, swallowed whole, leaving nothing but memory. This is the heartbeat of Atlantis, not fact, not fiction, but a story so potent it becomes more real than either. And as we emerge from its myth, we look again to the skies and seas, to the fragility of our own age. We build towers of glass and steel. We span continents with networks of light. We dream of colonies on other worlds. Yet beneath our achievements lingers the same truth, that hubris carries risk, that balance is fragile, that the earth is older and stronger than our might. Atlantis is the echo in our ears, warning and urging, reminding us that civilizations are not eternal. The shattered sky and the drowned city are not separate tales, but one. They remind us that the earth itself is both cradle and destroyer, that memory survives not in stone, but in story, and that the line between history and myth is never as clear as we hope. Whether or not Atlantis ever stood upon the earth, it will always stand within us, as metaphor, as caution, as dream. And beyond Atlantis lies another riddle, older and more cosmic still. For as the ice melted and the seas rose, the younger Dryas brought fire, cold, and extinction in a single sweep. Was it comet, climate, or chaos that reshaped the earth then? In the next chapter, we confront this enigma, the younger Dryas, the sudden chill, and the mystery of how close humanity came to vanishing altogether. The earth remembers in layers of ice, in rings of trees, in sediments laid down like pages of a book. And within those pages lies a chapter of mystery, the younger Dryas, a sudden, violent return to cold at the very moment when the world seemed to be softening into warmth. 13,000 years ago, the ice was retreating, rivers surged with meltwater, and humans began to settle into new patterns of life. Then, abruptly, the climate turned. Temperatures plummeted, glaciers advanced once more, and megafauna that had endured for millennia vanished from the earth. It was an interlude of cold lasting over 1,000 years, but its arrival and departure were so sudden, so dramatic, that it remains one of the greatest enigmas in Earth's story. To imagine it is to stand on the edge of a world in transition. The air is warming, ice sheets breaking apart with thunderous cracks, new rivers carving valleys through the land. Mammoths and mastodons still graze on tundra. Giant ground sloths lumber through the forests, and saber-toothed cats prowl the shadows. Humans, newly experimenting with cultivation, begin to dream of permanence in their settlements. And then, within a single lifetime, the warmth fades. Seasons grow harsher, crops fail, animals dwindle, and survival once more becomes uncertain. To those who lived it, the change must have seemed as though the earth itself had turned hostile, as though gods or spirits had chosen to punish. The cause of the younger Dryas has been debated for decades. One theory speaks of a comet, or perhaps many fragments of a comet, striking the earth. Proponents of this idea point to layers of blackened soil found across North America and beyond, filled with microspherules, nanodiamonds, and other debris consistent with cosmic impact. They suggest that firestorms swept across continents, igniting forests, filling skies with smoke, and plunging the climate back into cold. In this vision, the younger Dryas was not merely a natural fluctuation, but a cataclysm from the heavens, a blow from the sky that reset the balance of life. Others argue for water rather than fire. As the great ice sheets melted, torrents of fresh water poured into oceans, disrupting currents that carry warmth around the globe. If the North Atlantic conveyor belt faltered, climates would have shifted abruptly, plunging regions into sudden cold. In this version, no comet was required. The Earth's own restlessness was enough, the delicate balance of ocean and ice tipping toward catastrophe. Still others point to volcanic eruptions, to shifts in atmospheric composition, to natural variability written into the planet's cycles. The truth remains elusive, layered in uncertainty like the ice cores that record its memory. What we know is this: the Younger Dryas coincided with profound loss. In North America, the mammoth, the mastodon, the giant ground sloth, the short-faced bear, all vanished. Some argue human hunters played a role, others point to climate stress, and some see in their extinction the fingerprints of cosmic disaster. In Europe and Asia, too, species disappeared, ecosystems transformed. Humanity, fragile and scattered, endured only by adaptation, by innovation, by resilience forged in crisis. For archaeologists, the Younger Dryas looms as a shadow over early civilization. Sites such as Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, with its vast stone enclosures, date to the very edge of this period. Some scholars suggest its builders may have been responding to cosmic trauma, encoding in stone a memory of catastrophe, erecting monuments to gods of sky and fire in hopes of appeasement. Others caution against such speculation. Yet the coincidence remains haunting. Humanity began to build in stone just as the earth itself had reminded us of our fragility. Legends echo faintly of such times. Flood myths may contain fragments of memory of sudden climate shifts, of seas rising when glaciers melted at the Younger Dryas's end. Myths of fire from the sky, of stars falling, of worlds burned and reborn. These too may carry echoes of cosmic events. To those who lived it, the end of the Younger Dryas must have seemed apocalyptic. Forests igniting, ice collapsing, rivers surging, seas swelling. To weave such terror into story would have been inevitable, the only way to make sense of a world so violently unsteady. But the Younger Dryas is not only a tale of destruction, it is also a tale of survival. Humanity endured. We adapted to shifting climates, to vanishing prey, to landscapes reshaped in an instant. In the cold, we learned to innovate. In scarcity, we learned to cooperate. In uncertainty, we learned to dream of permanence. The shock of the Younger Dryas may even have spurred the very shift toward agriculture, forcing humans to find stability in a world that refused to offer it. If so, then catastrophe itself gave birth to civilization, the ashes of disaster fertilizing the soil of culture. And so the Younger Dryas lingers not as an event of the past, but as a reminder of the fragility of the present. We live in an age of climate once again in flux, seas rising, storms intensifying, ice retreating. The echoes of the Younger Dryas remind us that the earth does not move gently, that its shifts can be sudden and brutal, rewriting the conditions of survival in a single generation. To study it is not only to peer into prehistory, but to glimpse our own precarious reflection. Close your eyes and picture a camp on the threshold of the Younger Dryas. A family gathers around a fire, its flames struggling against the sudden cold. In the distance, the last of the mammoths move slowly across frozen ground, their massive forms fading from the world. Above, the night sky blazes with stars, and perhaps for a moment, one burns brighter, flaring, then vanishing, leaving only memory. To those who saw it, what did it mean? Was it a god's anger, a world's ending, or simply the sky itself shattering, Whatever the truth, it marked them, and through them it marks us still. The Younger Dryas is a riddle without solution, a mystery etched into ice and fire. Whether comet, flood, or chaos of currents, it reminds us that the earth is not fixed but fluid, not gentle but fierce, not a stage but a living actor in our story. We are not its masters, but its children, surviving only by learning to adapt to its moods. The Younger Dryas whispers this truth across millennia, a truth we forget at our peril. As this chapter fades, the cold lingers in imagination, but beyond it rises something else, the monuments and mysteries humanity left behind in its aftermath. Megaliths, circles of stone, vast alignments across the earth, structures whose silence speaks of knowledge we do not yet fully grasp. Who built them? Why? Were they responses to catastrophe, attempts to map the sky, to hold on to order when the world itself had unraveled? In the next chapter, we step into their shadow, the architects of silence, and the riddle of their enduring stones. When the earth settled after the chaos of the Younger Dryas, humanity stood in a changed world. The great beasts were gone, climates had shifted, and new landscapes awaited habitation. Yet in this fragile calm, humans did something extraordinary. They raised stones, not simple hearths or huts, but monuments of such scale and weight that their presence defies easy explanation. Across continents, from the high plateaus of Anatolia to the windswept plains of Britain, from the jungles of Mesoamerica to the deserts of Egypt, immense stones were placed with deliberate care. Circles, alignments, pyramids, and pillars emerged as if humanity, having endured fire and ice, now sought permanence in stone. These builders, anonymous to us, are the architects of silence. Consider Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, its stone circles rising more than 11,000 years ago, older than pottery, older than farming, older than the very villages that would come to dominate the Neolithic. Massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing more than 10 tons, were carved with animals, lions, vultures, snakes, boars. These were not shelters, not homes, but spaces for gathering, ritual, perhaps for story itself. They required immense labor to construct, suggesting cooperation on a scale never before seen. And then, mysteriously, they were buried, as if deliberately concealed, their silence preserved for millennia until rediscovery in our own time. What compelled these early people to shape such stones? Was it reverence, memory, fear of a sky that had shattered only generations before? Whatever the answer, the stones endure, speaking without words. From Anatolia, the pattern spreads outward. At Stonehenge, vast trilithons stand against the sky, aligned with the movements of sun and season. At Karnak in Brittany, thousands of standing stones march in rows across the land, a forest of rock that seems to echo some lost order. In Malta, temples carved from limestone curve like shells, their interiors shaped for ritual whose meaning is now gone. In South America, megaliths rise at Tiwanaku and Sacsayhuaman, their joints so precise that even a knife blade cannot slip between them. Across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, circles, alignments, and pyramids appear, as if humanity across the world heard the same call, to anchor meaning in stone. What binds these places together is not similarity of form, but silence of purpose. Archaeologists theorize. Calendars, astronomical observatories, centers of ritual, cemeteries, theaters of myth. Each idea holds merit, but none explains fully. The stones do not yield their secrets easily. They stand instead as questions carved into the landscape, reminders that our ancestors carried knowledge and intention we cannot wholly reconstruct. They are the silence between words, the breath between generations, the unsolved riddle of deep time. Standing before them, one feels more than curiosity. There is awe and perhaps unease. For how did people of such limited technology move stones weighing tens, even hundreds of tons? Ropes, levers, sledges, yes, but the scale of cooperation required suggests societies more complex than we imagine. To organize hundreds, perhaps thousands, to quarry, transport, and raise stones demands leadership, vision, and faith. It demands myth strong enough to bind communities in labor. The monuments are not only stone, they are the crystallization of belief, of shared dream. And what of their alignments with the heavens? Many of these sites correspond with solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles. The builders were not only moving rock, they were mapping the cosmos upon the earth. At Stonehenge, the rising sun of midsummer pierces the circle with perfect precision. At Chanquillo in Peru, towers track the sun's passage across the horizon throughout the year. In Nabta Playa, a megalithic circle in the Nubian desert, alignments suggest knowledge of the stars that predates Egyptian pyramids. These were not accidents. They were deliberate, careful, profound. The stones whisper of a human gaze turned upward, seeking order in the sky to make sense of chaos on earth. Yet the silence persists. We know what they are, but not fully why. Were they built to appease gods, to remember ancestors, to guard against future catastrophe? Some suggest they were calendars to track, seasons critical for survival. Others see them as ceremonial spaces where myths were enacted, where shamans spoke with spirits, where communities renewed their bond with the cosmos. And some wonder if they were attempts to control the unknown itself, to set in stone an order that the earth had so violently denied during the upheavals of the Younger Dryas. Whatever the reason, they remain as the most enduring human response to impermanence, to carve permanence from rock. The monuments outlived their builders. Civilizations rose and fell, villages turned to dust, languages vanished without trace, yet the stones endured. Grass grew around them, wind eroded them, but still they stood. When later peoples discovered them, they too wove stories to explain their presence. Giants had built them, gods had shaped them, heroes had raised them in a single night. The silence of the stones invited myth, and myth grew like ivy across their surfaces. Even now, when archaeologists measure and date and theorize, the silence remains. The stones resist final explanation. There is something profoundly human in this. We seek meaning in permanence, yet permanence always slips away. The stones remind us of both. They are enduring, yet empty of clear voice. They are strong, yet eroded. They survive, but their makers are gone. They are testaments to ambition, faith, and imagination, but they are also tombs of forgotten purpose. The architects of silence achieved immortality, but not clarity. We inherit their questions, not their answers. Close your eyes and stand among them in imagination. The wind whips across Salisbury Plain, rattling grass against stone. Shadows lengthen, and the sun aligns with a distant trilithon, piercing the circle with light. People gather, silent, expectant, their eyes turned upward. Perhaps they chant, perhaps they wait in awe. The stones loom above, unmoving, unyielding, guardians of a moment where earth and sky meet. Then the light passes, the alignment ends, and silence returns. What did they feel in that moment? Triumph, fear, connection with gods? We can only wonder. What unites all these sites, from Göbekli Tepe to Stonehenge to Tiwanaku, is the human refusal to accept transience. After floods, after ice, after fire from the sky, humanity chose to build in stone as if to say, "We will not be erased again." The monuments are defiance made solid, the will to remember in a world that forgets. They are promises to the future, messages carved in silence, waiting for us to listen. But what if these monuments are more than local responses? Some suggest they may reflect a shared inheritance of knowledge, a memory of catastrophe carried across generations, encoded in stone so it would not be lost again. Alignments to the stars may mark not only agricultural cycles, but cosmic events, reminders of a time when the heavens themselves reigned destruction. If so, then the monuments are not only calendars or temples, but warnings, stone inscriptions of a truth too dangerous to leave unwritten. Whether warning, worship, or wonder, the stones endure. They remind us that silence can be as powerful as speech, that questions can outlast answers, and that permanence, though fragile, is still possible. The architects of silence gave us not their words, but their stones, and in doing so, they gave us the gift of mystery. As this chapter closes, we step away from the stones but carry their silence with us. For beyond them lies an even deeper question, one not only of monuments, but of humanity itself. Were we the first to carve permanence into the earth, or could others long before us have done the same? Did civilizations rise and fall before memory, leaving only myths of gods, titans, and sky beings as faint echoes of their passing? In the next chapter, we move from the silence of monuments to the abyss of speculation, asking whether humanity truly stands alone in time, or whether we are heirs to worlds forgotten before our own. The stones speak, but what if their silence conceals not only human stories, but something older? What if the earth, in its vastness and age, has hosted not one history of civilization but many, separated by resets so complete that almost all evidence has been erased? To pose this question is to step from archaeology into imagination. Yet imagination is often the first stage of discovery. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and Homo sapiens only emerged in the last heartbeat of that timeline. Could it be that others walked paths of greatness before us, their monuments ground to dust, their memory lingering only as myth? Geology reminds us that the crust of the planet is restless. Mountains rise and crumble, continents drift, seas flood and retreat. A city built 100 million years ago would leave almost nothing visible today. Stone erodes, metals corrode, forests consume, oceans bury. Even our most enduring monuments, pyramids, skyscrapers, satellites, would vanish in the slow grind of geological time. Within 1 million years, the traces of human civilization would be reduced to anomalies in soil and stone. If this is true of us, why not of others? Myths whisper of such possibilities. Ancient texts speak of golden ages before memory, of gods who walked among mortals, of beings who shaped the earth with knowledge long forgotten. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians told of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the flood. In India, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana describe wars fought with weapons of fire and thunder, echoes of technologies we cannot place in their age. Greek stories recall titans who ruled before the Olympians, while Norse myths speak of giants and world-shattering battles long before humanity's rise. Were these simply metaphors, or the faintest recollections of something real, carried across time like whispers in the dark? Even the Earth itself bears riddles. Some scientists speak of the Silurian hypothesis, the thought experiment of whether an industrial civilization could have existed millions of years ago and left detectable traces today. The conclusion: it would be difficult. Only subtle chemical signatures in sediments, anomalies in carbon cycles, or unusual concentrations of rare metals might endure. To us, they would appear as natural oddities, not proof of civilizations. Thus, the absence of evidence is not necessarily the evidence of absence. The earth forgets quickly, even as it remembers in silence. Consider the great extinctions. 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck near Chicxulub, ending the age of dinosaurs. Yet in the millions of years they walked the earth, what stories were lived that we cannot imagine? Reptiles once ruled the land, the sea, the air. Could intelligence have arisen in forms now extinct, leaving no trace we would recognize? Skeptics remind us that no fossils show evidence of tools or culture, but perhaps the traces were lost or never resembled ours. Intelligence may not always look like us, may not always leave pyramids or temples. It may vanish as silently as it arose. Closer to our own past, speculation lingers on human cousins, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other now lost branches of the human tree. We know they were skilled, that they buried their dead, that they crafted tools and jewelry, that they mingled with our ancestors. Did they build myths of their own, stories never written down, architectures now erased? If we had perished instead of them, might they have risen to cities, to monuments, to futures beyond imagining? The line between humanity and before humanity is thin, blurred by interbreeding, by memory, by loss. And then there are the anomalies, the artifacts that stir controversy. Carvings said to be older than they should be, objects found where they do not belong, maps depicting coasts unknown to their makers. Many are misinterpretations, hoaxes, or accidents of geology. Yet the allure remains. What if just one is genuine? What if a fragment of advanced knowledge truly slipped through from an earlier age? A shard of pottery, a trace of metallurgy, a whisper of design. Each invites us to imagine a story erased too thoroughly to prove. The ocean deepens the mystery. Most of our planet's surface lies beneath water, unexplored, uncharted. If civilizations rose in times of lower sea levels, their remains now lie hidden beneath thousands of feet of salt water and sediment. We have mapped Mars in more detail than our own seabeds. What secrets could rest there, drowned and forgotten, waiting for technology or chance to reveal them? Perhaps the myths of Atlantis, of Mu, of Lemuria, are not memories of one place, but echoes of many, scattered across oceans and epochs. To dwell on these questions is not to abandon reason, but to embrace humility. We know so little. Our science, vast as it is, still peers through a narrow window of time. We crave certainty, but the earth resists, reminding us that most of its story is hidden from us. To wonder if others came before is to honor that mystery, to admit that we may not be the first nor the last to walk paths of greatness and ruin. Yet even without proof, the idea serves a purpose. It warns us of impermanence. If civilizations have risen before, only to vanish without trace, then our own permanence is illusion. Skyscrapers, satellites, networks of glass and steel, all will crumble, vanish, dissolve into the earth. If we disappeared tomorrow, in 1,000,000 years only silence would remain. The thought is sobering, but also liberating. It places us within the vastness of time, reminding us that we are part of a story far older, far greater than ourselves. Close your eyes and imagine a city, not of humans, but of something older. Towers of basalt rise against a prehistoric sky, their shape strange to us, their purpose unknowable. Creatures, intelligent but unlike us, walk among them, crafting myths of their own, fearing their own gods, watching their own skies. Then a catastrophe comes, fire, flood, impact, ice, and all is gone. Millions of years later, Only scattered anomalies remain, traces too faint to decipher. And we, unaware, walk upon their bones, imagining ourselves the first. Perhaps this is only fantasy. Perhaps humanity truly is unique, the first to build and dream and reach for the stars. But even if so, the possibility of before serves as mirror and warning. It reminds us that greatness does not guarantee survival, that time is merciless, that silence awaits even the most enduring of achievements. To live with this knowledge is to live with humility, to build not only with ambition, but with care. The architects of silence we met in the last chapter left their questions in stone. The possibility of civilizations before humanity leaves us with questions in imagination. Both remind us that history is fragile, memory incomplete, and time vast beyond measure. And both prepare us for the greatest silence of all, the ocean itself, which guards not only the ruins of our ancestors, but the verdict of time upon our species. For in the final turn of our journey, we return to the sea, the ocean that erases and preserves, that feeds and destroys, that has always been the final arbiter of permanence. What it has taken, it still holds, waiting in the depths. In the closing chapter, we listen once more to the ocean's verdict, to the silence that swallows all but memory, and to the hope that mystery will always endure. The sea has always been both cradle and grave. From its waters, life first stirred, and into its depths, countless stories have vanished. It is the final stage upon which every civilization must one day bow, whether by flood, erosion, or the slow surrender of memory. To end our journey here is to acknowledge the ocean not only as backdrop, but as judge, the vast, unrelenting force that holds the verdict of time. Stand at the edge of any shore at dusk, and you feel it. The waves roll endlessly, each one erasing what the last revealed. Footprints disappear in moments. Sandcastles dissolve into foam. Even rock is ground smooth given enough centuries. This is the ocean's truth. Nothing endures untouched, yet in its depths, paradox reigns. What the sea destroys on the surface, it preserves beneath. Ancient forests still lie beneath the North Sea, their roots locked in silt. Pottery, hearthstones, and tools remain sealed in mud at the bottom of bays where villages once stood. Ships sunk in storms rest intact for centuries, their timbers guarded by the very waters that claimed them. The ocean erases and archives at once, destroying memory above, but protecting it below. Throughout human history, we have returned to the sea with questions. What lies beneath? What worlds has it taken? Myths tell us of empires drowned, gods enraged, punishments delivered in waves. Archaeology gives us fragments, submerged harbors in the Mediterranean, drowned plains off India, stone formations in Japan, artifacts pulled from the depths. Yet the larger story remains hidden. Our tools, for all their sophistication, have mapped only a fraction of the ocean floor. Mars and the moon are better known to us than the abysses at our own feet. In that darkness, the ocean keeps its secrets. It is easy to imagine that, within its vaults, entire chapters of human history lie intact. Doggerland, with its meadows and rivers, may still hold the hearths and homes of its people, preserved under layers of silt. The Black Sea flood may conceal villages in its depths, their walls still standing in the dark. The disputed sites at Yonaguni or Kambat may yet reveal themselves as cities or illusions. But whether real or imagined, the allure is the same, that the ocean holds the missing pages of our past, locked away until we learn how to read them. But the verdict of the ocean is not only about the past, it is also about the future. As ice melts and seas rise once more, Coastlines are redrawn before our eyes. Cities glittering with steel and glass, built on coasts for trade and power, find themselves vulnerable to the same fate as Doggerland, Dwarka, or Atlantis. New Orleans, Venice, Jakarta, Miami. Names we know may one day be spoken as we now speak of drowned worlds, places remembered not as bustling centers, but as ruins beneath the tide. The ocean is patient. It does not hurry. It moves in centuries and millennia, always advancing, always reshaping. The verdict it delivers is not sudden, but inevitable. This truth humbles us. For all our technology, for all our mastery of flight, energy, and communication, we are no more permanent than the Neolithic farmers who lost their fields to flood. Our skyscrapers may gleam brighter, our networks hum faster, but we too build on borrowed ground. A single storm can remind us of our fragility. A single tide can undo decades of construction. The ocean waits, as it always has, for the moment when it will reclaim. Yet within this inevitability lies a strange comfort. For the ocean does not only take, it also connects. It links continents, carries currents of warmth and life, sustains billions through its bounty. The same waters that drowned Doggerland allowed humans to sail, to migrate, to discover new lands. The same waves that erode our shores also carry the possibility of discovery, of new horizons. The ocean's verdict is not only destruction, it is balance, loss and renewal, forgetting and remembering, erasure and preservation. Perhaps this is why the sea has always inspired reverence. Ancient mariners prayed before voyages, knowing that the ocean could as easily deliver them to safety as swallow them whole. Myths of sea gods, mermaids, and leviathans remind us that humanity has always seen the ocean as alive, as more than water, as a power to respect. To this day, standing before its vastness, we feel small, our pulse slowed by the rhythm of its waves. The sea speaks not in words, but in silence, its horizon an endless line reminding us that mystery will always endure. And mystery may be the truest gift of all. For certainty closes, but mystery opens. The drowned lands and whispered cities beneath the waves remind us that history is incomplete, that knowledge is fragile, that imagination is necessary. We may never know if Atlantis was real, if Yonaguni's terraces were carved by hand, if ancient empires once flourished on coasts now lost. But in the not knowing, in the space between evidence and story, something greater emerges. Awe. Awe that we live on a planet still larger than our comprehension. Awe that time is deeper than our imagination. Awe that the ocean holds secrets too vast for us to master. Close your eyes one final time and picture it. A diver drifts slowly down through darkening blue, his lamp cutting narrow beams into the water. Around him is silence, broken only by the rasp of his breath. Suddenly the light catches an edge, stone, carved, straight, deliberate. He reaches out, brushes silt away, feels the cool surface beneath his hand. Is it wall or rock, ruin or chance? He cannot know. Above him, the ocean closes in, vast, eternal, indifferent. Whatever truth lies here, it belongs to the sea now. Humanity is only a visitor, a questioner, a witness. The verdict is silence, and so we end where we began, with the ocean keeping its secrets. It is the cradle of life, the destroyer of cities, the preserver of memory, the final arbiter of permanence. What if the oceans hid empires before recorded history? Perhaps they did. Perhaps they still do. But whether truth or myth, their silence reminds us that the earth is not ours alone, that time belongs to no one, that history is always unfinished. The sea waits, patient, eternal, its verdict written not in words, but in waves. In that verdict lies both warning and wonder. Warning that nothing we build will last forever. wonder, that mystery endures, that stories remain, that imagination continues to sail beyond the horizon. The ocean does not reveal all, and perhaps it never will, but it gives us enough to dream, and in dreaming we keep the past alive. Thus our journey closes, not with certainty, but with silence, the silence of the sea, vast, unknowable, eternal.